It really is the norm. In fact, we passed a code in 2003 that said new homes would not have lawn grass in the front yards, and that, of course, the builders typically do the front yards in our jurisdictions. And the new homeowner could not have lawn grass on more than half of the landscapable area of the backyard. We did a study, 5-year study, biggest one ever conducted, and we found that lawns were using 4 times as much water as other landscape styles. And we can't afford that. And they were being used aggressively as ornamental plantings. So, kind of our mantra there is, if the only time you walk on your lawn you're pushing a lawnmower, it's probably ornamental. And so there are functional areas. There are places where kids play. There are places where people entertain. There are areas where it's appropriate to have turf grass. But we had done all kinds of things: street medians, the 18-inch wide strip between a sidewalk and a street, just all kind of ridiculous slopes, all kinds of crazy stuff. And we were putting 10 feet. The average homeowner there was putting 10 feet rainfall equivalent onto their lawn. And we found when we gave them an incentive to change it, they were putting 1/4 as much water onto their alternative landscape. And don't get me wrong, the biggest thing we had to teach them was, we are not asking you to get white quartz rocks, a wagon wheel, a cow skull, and a cactus. You plant whatever you want, but you can plant rose bushes and trees and vines and flowers and put them on low volume irrigation, and you can have a yard where you don't see anything but green living plants, and you're still using half the water that you would use trying to irrigate a lawn. In fact, when you look at carbon, and we're obviously very concerned about carbon, but a lot of people think, well, and I'm sure you've heard this, many of you may have heard this, well, plants sequester carbon, right? They take carbon dioxide out of the air and they turn it into plant tissue. That's a good thing. And so the lawn industry was saying, well, wait a minute, we're an environmental plus, we're helping with carbon sequestration. And then you go, well, what about the lawnmower? Because that's our first thought again, is I put gas into that thing and exhaust comes out of it and I have to push it around. The lawn will sequester far more carbon than the lawnmower will emit. But the lawnmower ain't the problem, the water is the problem. There's 6.5 kilowatt hours of electricity in 1,000 gallons of water in my jurisdiction. And by the time you've applied 2 inches to your lawn, you have exceeded the carbon sequestration potential of that lawn for the entire year. And remember, I just told you, these people were putting 120 inches of water on their lawn. So the carbon impacts, the energy impacts were enormous. We changed all that. We don't put grass in front yards. We don't put grass at all on commercial buildings. Find me a 7-Eleven that needs a lawn to sell Slurpees and gas. We still buy that stuff. They still have greenery. They still have trees, shrubs, flowers. We don't put grass on those anymore. It really has changed people's expectations, but it's the way that we should have been living in the desert all along. It can be attractive, it can add to their quality of life. We don't have to hurl resources at trying to make Nevada look like Nebraska. Now you might think, okay, it's Nevada, it's 1.6 inches of rain and it's horribly dry and hot there, and it is. But the same thing is going on all over the United States. Places where they used to tolerate the idea that when the rain came, the lawn would grow, and when the rain turned off, the lawn would be a little brown and rough looking. They don't do that anymore. A sprinkler system, a friend of mine who's an irrigation contractor in Minnesota. Minnesota, lots of rain in Minnesota, 10,000 or more lakes, right? He says an irrigation system is considered a necessary appliance in a new home. Remember when we didn't have garbage disposals and dishwashers? And then they started creeping in, and now you go, good grief, who wouldn't have one of those? You got to have it. So the market has changed, and irrigation system has been considered a necessity, and the water use, outdoor water use of new homes, even in places with 20, 30, 40 inches of rainfall, is being driven up because people are not allowing nature to run its course. They're not only turning these things on when they're necessary, they're running in the rain in some cases. and they're using inordinate amounts of water. And that was the single most contentious issue in developing WaterSense New Home, was the perception that people still need a lawn in front of their WaterSense New Home. And I don't live in these places. I'll talk for my own jurisdiction, but I'm thinking, you know what, if the rain's gonna water it, you have all the lawn you want, because Mother Nature will take care of it. It's an appropriate plan in that environment. The challenge is when you put in a sprinkler system and then you put humans into that equation, it turns ugly.
Do you have any guidelines for controllers for these systems in your program?
In my program?
Yeah.
We're trying real hard to push smart controllers, so everyone knows that plants need more water in July than they need in January. And a lot of the waste is because people have to go out and push buttons. They have to change that controller from July to January. Smart controller does that for you, but the technology is one that we're having difficulty getting people to adopt. We don't have requirements for smart controls right now because we don't think they've evolved to the point that people are going to get completely satisfactory results from them. The manufacturers keep working on that. We keep working on that. We do have that requirement in the Water Smart Home program for the common areas. So if KB builds a neighborhood and they have some streetscaping or entryways or a park, we say, well, that has to have one of these intelligent control systems on it. The individual homeowners were still a little leery about putting the super intelligent box into the garage of an individual home, because they have to be you put a lot of effort into programming them up front, and then they operate pretty flawlessly. But if you make mistakes on the front end, you don't get the results you're looking for. People are perplexed enough, I think, by the little device in the garage. If we add new features to it, we don't think the public's quite ready for that on a mass scale. So no, we don't.
Stephanie, I see that weather-based controllers are in the pipeline for WaterSense labeling. Is that part of the WaterSense Home program now, or is that in the future?
Right now, there's no requirement for a weather-based controller in the WaterSense Home, and that's only because there's no WaterSense label for weather-based controller yet. It's one of the technologies we've worked on for a long time. Basically, we've been working on the specification for a WaterSense labeled controller since the program started. The biggest problem we've had is that there are no standards for irrigation equipment, and they don't have they don't have a standard-setting basis for determining for their products. And so we've spent a lot of time and effort trying to move the industry towards that kind of a process. And so where we've been able to develop products, specifications for all these other products in about 2 years, it's taken us the better part of 7, and I will say a whole nother year from now.
But it's all been fun.
Yeah, it's been really fun. And to get that product to be sort of on the same basis as, like, say, a WaterSense labeled shower head. And so that's what we continue to work on with that program.
So Ken, as the home builder up here, what's the acceptance level in the marketplace of, people early on, water restrictors in fixtures were kind of a failure, and people would override them or take them out. So are you at a point as a builder now where you're seeing acceptance and support for this in the market?
Yes, like everything else, things have evolved. Probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, they probably weren't very good. Between the low flow toilets and the restrictors in shower heads and the faucets, but the new products that are coming out are a lot better. Masco doing what they're doing, they've really changed a lot, where people don't feel like they're getting cheated, where they got to, take everything apart and see if they can pull things out. You don't have that problem anymore. And the toilets are another thing that, people thought they'd have to flush 2 and 3 times, and that's not the case anymore. So we've had quite a good acceptance for that.
Okay.